Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at Grand Prix Charlotte. I'm Nick Miller alongside Bob Huang. How you doing, sir?
Doing all right.
You've done some brewing in your time. I've talked to you at a couple invitationals, a couple opens. You kind of showed us the world of Blue Red, Delver, and Legacy back in the day. But now you're here with a even more powerful deck and a Goryo's Vengeance style deck that we've seen, Joe Lissette use last week at the Invitational, but you have gone just hyper mode on this deck. You've got the combo of Goryo's Vengeance and Through the Breach with Grizzlebrand, but you're not using Emrakul in your build.
No.
You've got a whole nother style going on. That includes cards like Nourishing Shoal, Berberigmos, and World Spineworm. What all is going on with this deck?
Yeah, it's very different from Joe's build, and you mentioned Blue Red Delver. I would say that's one of the best decks I've ever been to a tournament, taken to a tournament. I would put this deck like a significant notch above that. This is the best deck I've ever played in a tournament, and there's a few reasons for that. I think number one, this deck wins at instant speed and outside of the combat step. So the Fury of the Horde builds, you generally need to attack with them, and that leaves you more vulnerable to things like Deceiver X start pepping down your guy. This deck, all you need to do is you get a Grizzlebrand into play, and then you draw 7. If you can hit Nourishing Shoal and World Spineworm, that's 11 life right there. So you get a lot of redraws with this build. And it sounds silly, but you draw your entire deck by chaining those 2 cards. And then you're able to put in a Berberigmos Enraged. He has the ability to discard a land card to bolt your opponent, and you put him in at instant speed, usually with Through the Breach, but possibly with Goryo's Vengeance as well. So once you get him in play, then you discard your hand, you discard all the lands, and you kill him.
Right, it's no joke that you actually draw your deck. Like, unlike the previous versions, I can only draw about 14, maybe 21 cards. You actually, just to draw your whole deck, you have it all there. Your last round opponent, seriously asked how many cards do you have in hand, but you sort of thought it was a joke because you just had so many cards. But you've got this crazy setup that works at instant speed and doesn't use the combat steps, so you kind of get to play around all those other cards that you're talking about. Now, you have a similar setup to what Joe had last week with Faithless Looting, but you also have Night Whisper for more velocity, and you have some fast mana stuff like Simian Spirit Guide, Manamorphose, and Desperate Ritual to power these powerful spells out.
Exactly.
Now, talk about some of the different ways you can win. I've seen people, you have a couple friends playing this deck, all made day 2 with it. I've seen like in-step Through the Breach for World Spineworm, just attack them with 3/5/5s type stuff. Go over some of the possible lines you can play with the deck.
So I would say, the main way I've been winning, probably like 70% of my games, is getting a Grizzlebrand into play, drawing my deck and then killing them with that. I would say that's plan A typically. Plan B is typically Through the Breaching World Spineworm. Against any deck without Path to Exile, it's often too much for them to handle. And 15 damage, this is modern format, a lot of the times one hit will be enough. So I would say that's plan A. Plan B. Plan C involves lots of really weird things. I've beaten down one time I had a hand where I just had to put in Berberigmos twice because I never saw Grizzlebrand or World Spineworm, and you can get there really weird ways. So I would say this deck is actually fairly intricate as far as combo decks go.
Now, another interesting aspect is how you fight the counterspell decks, and we don't really see Through the Breach and Goryo's Vengeance spliced much. But with Nourishing Shoal, you actually get to do a crazy in-step splice onto this, force them to counter it, untap, play it again, and just get through the counterspells that way.
Exactly, because for Splice onto Arcane, all you have to do is reveal it. So as Nick said, you do it the end step, they counter it, that's fine. You untap, you play it again, you get a Grizzlebrand into play and go to town. My friend Zach Jesse is also playing it. He's currently undefeated at 9-0, and he's saying that he's never spliced more in his life. He said every single round he spliced, and he was like, what is going on here? He did not think Splice onto Arcane was going to be a core ability of a competitive modern deck.
The look around the the surrounding tables when you hear someone say splice this onto Nourishing Shoal, everyone just kind of turns their head and they're like, what's going on over at this table? So you have all these things going on. You also have the temples in your deck. You have a more solid mana base than what Joe was using last week with a bunch of 5-color lands. You have Temple of Malice, Backleaf Cliffs, allows your mana to be more stable. But you also have a sideboard package that has a lot of hate, which appears to be infect based? Because you've told me that your only losses with this deck in constructed or in competitive Magic are to infect.
Yeah, I'm 25-0 against decks not named infect, and 0-3 against decks named infect. So I honestly, like, I don't want to say I conceded the matchup, but there are hate cards I could have played, like, you know, something like Knight of Soul's Betrayal. I chose not to play that. I chose to hope to dodge infect. I've hit it twice this tournament, so I'm sitting at 8-2, still a good record. I think I have a good shot, but yeah, it's not a good matchup.
So another plan of attack is you have the fast mana abilities to get Blood Moon into play post board against all the crazy lands decks and things like that.
Yeah, that's huge against, like, you know, decks like Amulet. Like, you know, this deck is kind of a rogue deck. They don't expect Blood Moon, so you really just, like, are very favored post board against Amulet. It's great against the black-green decks because it slows them way down. I like to think of it as like a Leyline of Sanctity, which is a card I really dislike because it's a card, you know, if you draw later, it's completely dead. I like to think of Blood Moon as a Leyline of Sanctity that you can, like, draw in your first few turns and be really good. Because whenever, you know, the black-green deck Thoughtseize you, like, they have to take the Blood Moon anyways. And if they don't take the Blood Moon, then they can't cast spells for the rest of the game.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah, so it's definitely, you know, a very, very powerful card.
Now you also got Pact of Negation, another card that kind of comes in because you're killing at instant speed, sort of like the Ad Nauseam deck does.
Exactly.
You have just free reign to play these free counter spells.
Yeah, it's great. Like, as far as Pact of Negation goes, I've won like a few games with the Pact trigger on the stack. So, like, there are crazy things you can do with that, and, like, yeah, like you said, you can play it because you win at instant speed. You know, there's crazy things you can do.
You got some Inquisitions, you got a lot of Axes. Removal also helps getting cards into the graveyard, allows the instant speed kill, Pyroclasm, good against the Swarm decks. Shadow Storm Affinity, I assume.
Yes.
And then a Beseju helps in the control matchups.
Yeah, I bring it in against, like, all the slower blue decks. I don't bring it, excuse me, I don't bring it in against Delver, but I bring it in everywhere else.
Okay. What are some tips, you know, leaving the deck tech here, some tips you would give to people on how to pilot the deck, or, you know, new builds for this?
I would say, like, the deck takes a lot of practice. There are a lot of non-intuitive things about it. So you have 4 Spirit Guides and 2 Desperate Rituals. When you're going off, one trick you can do is you can exile 2 Spirit Guides for 2 red, Nourishing Shoal, splice on a Desperate Ritual, so that adds on an extra red. So you can that makes it easier to hit the 4 mana for Through the Breach Splice. And you always need to be keeping track of, you know, both cards you scry to the bottom or cards you exile, because you only have a finite number of resources. Like, you could potentially draw your deck and, like, have already used 3 fast mana sources, so you only have 3 fast mana sources in your deck, and then you would you would be stuck with a whole bunch of cards that you can't cast. So you always need to be mindful of what's really going on. And there's, like, things like, you know, Faithless Looting to get Boar Bergamos in the graveyard. You need to draw 2 cards for that. So if you draw your entire deck, you can't actually go for that line anymore. So there's really random things like that you need to be very aware of and keeping track of all times. So, yeah.
All right, well, the deck looks awesome. You're off to a great record. Your friends are off to a great record. We wish you the best of luck. Thanks for joining us here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Charlotte.